Hey, welcome back. So check this out. I'm in Shrubble. I'm at a book signing. And I'm talking to people, and while I'm talking to people about my books, I'm looking across the room, and I'm seeing this woman captivating her audience. And I said, I gotta find out what this lady's all about. As soon as I did, I said, would you like to be on the show? She said, certainly. My name's Dacquino. Her name is Sarah Bracey White. Sarah, what a treat to have you here.
Thank you.
You have written a book called Primary Lessons. It is a memoir. Talk to me. Who is Sarah Bracey White?
I'm a storyteller
Ah.
from the South who thought she was going to write the great American novel.
Oh, man, another one. I know another person who tried that.
Got an agent. My agent schlepped the book around. Every editor said, is this the story of her life? He's asking me, and I said, of course not. My mother would turn over in her grave if she thought I was passing this off as my life story. And I kept getting the question, we want to hear about her life. Can we? But I'm from the South where you don't tell your family
that's
business.
Right. Some things stay home.
Yes, so it took me a long time to go from writing fictionalized versions of my life to writing the actual
Just
truth.
getting down to it.
Getting down to it. And I really didn't set out to write a book to be published. I began to write this book to overcome my ambivalence about my feeling about my mother.
Wow.
My mother sent me to live with her sister in Philadelphia for the first 5 years of
How
my
old
life.
were you?
I was about 9 months old.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
My father had lost his job as a teacher in the South because of his involvement with the NAACP.
Uh-oh.
And my mother had to go back to work to teach. I was the baby, 5 years younger than my next older sister, and there was no one left in the South of her family to take care of me. But her sister, who lived in Philadelphia, took me in. She and her husband had no children. She ran her own business. She was a successful woman. She made me feel that when I rose in the morning, the sun came up. And when I went to bed at night, the sun went down. 5 years later, I'm old enough to go to school, and my mother comes to get me and takes me into the Jim Crow South as a 5-year-old who has not been brought up to think that children are heard, not seen. I had been allowed to talk. So imagine this child coming into the South questioning everything.
It reminds me of a young man named Till who had the same experience.
And
only the ending to his story was not a good one.
And my mother's job was to keep my lips zipped. Why can't I do that? Why can't we get waited on first? We've been standing in line, all those kinds of things.
Northern attitude in the South was not welcome.
And this attitude bumped up against the attitude of my mother and my older sisters, who were used to the Southern way of living and accepted it. I talk about my first taxi ride from the train station as a 5-year-old, seeing things in my hometown of Sumter, South Carolina. And my sister keeps saying, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. And I just refuse to accept that. So Primary Lessons is the story of my life from the time I'm 5 until I'm 17, when I graduate from high school and leave the South.
Wow, it reminds me of the story of, I have a very dear friend, Janice Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And Janice had to be escorted into a segregated school. Tough life. And people don't understand it unless you live it. So when people write the story, it's really a gift to those who didn't experience it themselves. So now you wrote about your experiences, the pain, and how did you get through it?
It took me a long time to write this book, and I didn't understand why I couldn't write everything at once. because there were so many things going on. In addition to the circumstances of life in the South, the Jim Crow rules and all of that, my family was a family in turmoil. As I said, my father lost his job because of involvement with the NAACP.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he would not give the names of the teachers at his school who had attended the meeting. So he lost his job. My mother blamed him for sacrificing his family
For his
for
beliefs.
his beliefs.
Wow.
So there was that conflict. So my
Wow.
father would find work other places and come back and forth home every time he
It
came
must have
home.
been very difficult for you at 5 to be taken away. I mean, I hate to say it, but from your mother. I mean, in many ways, your aunt had become your mother.
That was the conflict for me.
Yeah.
I knew my mother's existence. She came to visit me. I knew my siblings who were older and lived in the South. But to me, my aunt was this wonderful person. I loved her. And I can tell you that when I actually had to write the scene where I leave her house, we go to the train station and she tells me, when I cry and say, I don't want to go, and she says, I don't want you to go, but there are times we have to do things we don't want to do.
Yeah.
I'm 5 years old. Now, she hasn't, because I'm 5, she hasn't explained
Yeah, and
the
this
circumstances.
is not like don't eat your broccoli. This is real life situation. To be torn from your family,
And I decided at 5, on that train ride between Philadelphia and Sumter, South Carolina, I was not going to be fooled by the pretty, smiling lady, my mother, who everybody thought was nice. And I knew she was mean, because if she weren't mean, she would let me stay with Aunt Susie.
Yeah.
But I also decided that I wasn't going to love anybody but God, because all these adults had let me down. I couldn't trust them. My aunt told me I'd always be her little girl.
Wow. And then she, in a way, let you go.
She let me
But-
go, and she said it wasn't
So you
her
were let go
decision.
twice.
Twice.
Twice. And then even, I mean, I hate to ask you this, because I almost feel like it's none of my business, but have you ever forgiven your mother?
This book was my forgiveness. When I say, when you have to deal with a person, not just from the 5-year-old child's viewpoint,
Yeah.
the problem for me was my mother died when I was 17.
Oh, my goodness.
Just
So she
before-
left you again.
She left me again. So it was, everybody knows teenagers think they're smarter than their parents,
Yeah,
but
they do.
they get older and they cross that point and realize they really aren't. I never had the chance to cross that point with my mother.
Yeah. Oh, that's hard.
So I always had this, I loved my mother, but I just took care of her. I was her caretaker. I was this, I was that. My mother was not the hands-on,
Yeah.
oh, you're a sweet girl and I love you and you're doing well in school. It wasn't that. But it was my mother's strength that made me strong enough to survive her death. I get kids who say to me, how did you keep going? My mother had given me a certain amount of courage and strength and allowed
Yeah.
me to be resistant to her.
Sometimes it's the difficulties in life that provide us the comfort to be who we are.
Yes. And I was allowed to be this kid, but I knew how to keep it under a control that would keep me from getting killed
Yeah.
or slapped by my mother, because I had this mouth. I wanted to tell my mother how to better her life. I told her, 1, she should divorce my absentee father. 2, she should move north and get herself a better job and get a better life.
So did your father leave shortly after she gave you up?
In the timetable, my mother had me. My father moved away finding work. Sometimes he would come home, sometimes he would send money. He came home just before I was 5. My mother got pregnant again, and he left. My father became an alcoholic when he stopped being allowed to teach. And when you look at his background, you understand. My father's mother and father were college graduates.
Wow.
His grandfather
And
owned
for that
1,200
period in our history, that was big
That
time.
was a big deal.
Big
And
time.
it was because his grandfather a man who could neither read nor write, owned 1,200 acres of farmland.
Wow.
So he came from a family where education was the key. So all my father knew was teaching school. When he was robbed of the one thing that made him feel like a man in the South, he had no sense of confidence. He began to drink. So just to skip ahead, my educated father died as a migrant worker in the orange groves of the Donald Duck Orange Juice Company from an infectious disease acquired in the fields.
Good Lord. And how old were you at that time?
I was 17. Both my parents died the year I was 17.
Oh my goodness. You, man, you took the rough road.
And I had no real idea of how to deal with this. Nobody sent me to a therapist. Nobody sat down and talked to me about it. I simply kept putting one foot in front of the other because those 12 years under my mother's guidance, when my father would come and go, had given me a sense of purpose. My purpose was I was going to get an education and I was going to get out of the South.
Now, your oldest sister?
My next oldest sister is 5 years older than I am.
Right.
The oldest is 10 years older than I am. So for them,
Were they
remember,
around?
by the time I was 5, realized that my sister who's 10 years older is 15. So she's getting ready to graduate from high school. So in this period when I come home, I am the snooty little northern girl who looks down on their life.
Yeah.
I moved from Philadelphia, where I lived in a 4-bedroom house, into a 3-room house that I shared with 5 people.
Wow.
I didn't eat the things. I told my mother, I don't eat that. I think they were having neck bones and rice and greens for dinner. I don't eat that. And my mother finally fries chicken, and she says, well, do you like that? And I said, I like it, but I still don't like it here. And my goal is to get out. And as a 5-year-old, this is what I did to escape the South. My aunt told me that I would learn, go to school, and be happy and play with my siblings and have a good time, and that I could write her a letter and tell her how much I liked it. Well, by the time I learned to write, I was almost 6. I had gotten into a Catholic school on my own. I lied to the nuns and told them I was old enough to go to school because I wanted to learn to write so I could write this letter.
Wow.
When I wrote her the letter, she wrote back and said to me, your mother decides where you live. So that was all the more reason I was not going to love any of these people. I decided I was going to be a nun and I was going to love God. He would take care of me. And my mother had grave problems with that because I was an African Methodist Episcopal, had been christened in the church and went to the church on Sunday, but I would go to Catholic Mass prior to going to the church with my mother and father, my mother and siblings. But I was this determined child.
You were a rebel?
I was a rebel and didn't know it. I think that the thing is, when people say, was I a rebel? I was a feminist before the idea of being a feminist was ever floated. I simply wanted to run my life the way I wanted to run it.
You were more than a feminist. I mean, you were beyond gender. You were just a survivor of life.
Isn't that what we all are?
Yeah. No, some of us don't survive. You are a survivor. It's a big difference. Big difference. And God, you learned at a very early age that it's about you. It's what you can make of your life and how you can step above it all.
And I was
you
fortunate.
had so much to step above.
Well, I was fortunate because, one, I went to a segregated school, which served me very well because my teachers knew my family. I was the 4th daughter in a school. Oh, you're one of the white girls. Are you smart like your sister? The standard to which I was held was a very high standard. I had to do all I could. I couldn't just kind of slide through and go, oh, no. I had a teacher that I said to her, don't you like me? Why do you keep me after school? She says, because you talk too much. But I said, but I'm doing my classwork. And she said, yes, but the other people in class haven't done their work yet, and you're talking to
I
them.
know. I have a granddaughter, same way. She'll be the top, but boy, oh boy, there's people want to put you in your little place, and you grew up in the factory years of education.
Yes.
Where everyone had to be the same, and it's very difficult.
Well, I was never trying to be like anybody else. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And fortunately, my teachers encouraged that. When I said to you that I thought I was this northerner, I didn't talk slow like southerners. So I became the MC at the school for every program. I was the person who, when I became a contributor to the school newspaper.
A true survivor. Learn to control the situation.
Yes.
Instead of letting the situation beat you, take over the situation. Yeah.
Well, I kind of just kept doing one thing and another and another.
Wow. So this book is a series of all those memories, of all those good times and bad times. So where does your husband come into this?
I tell people the reason I can't write book 2 of my memoir series is because I'm too busy living book 3. I didn't marry till I was 44 years old.
Wow.
And people say the first time, I go, yes.
Yeah, because you weren't going to have any man tell you what to do.
I wasn't having anybody. And when we got engaged, my husband insisted that he had to talk to my oldest relative. And I said, I'm 44 years old. You don't have to ask anybody to marry me. And he said, no. He said, I'm Italian. In our culture, we have to talk to the relatives before you carry the woman off. I'm like, okay. So I take him to meet my oldest sister. Realized both my parents had this. I take him to meet my oldest sister. She takes him aside and says, there's something I have to tell you. And I'm thinking, what is she going to tell him? I've told him everything about my life. She tells him, we've been trying to change her for 44 years and it hasn't worked, so you should know before you marry her,
good luck.
You are not going to be able to change her. And he said,
you get what you get.
And he said, why would I try to change her?
Nice.
I love
that was
her
the man to
just
marry?
the way she is. I said,
Beautiful.
perfect, marry her.
Yeah, so you're in. Come over.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And he has been one of my strongest supporters. The reason this book is as good as it is because he said to me one day, you know your mother loved you. I said, why do you say that? He said, you write about her as this kind of ephemeral spirit, whatever. And I said, well, she just took care of me. I was her caretaker. My mother was sick and I was the person who did so much stuff. And he said, no, your mother loved you. Tell me something your mother did that showed you she loved you. I said, well, she never hugged me. She never did this. He said, tell me. So for weeks, I had to keep iterating for him things my mother did. And then I said, it's stupid for me to think my mother didn't love me. What was the story behind it? So I wrote this book to make sense for me of why I felt like that.
One of the first signs of her love for you is that she let you go.
I think
she thought she was saving you.
Yes, because all of her relatives had migrated north. Had she left me with someone, a friend or paid someone, I would have been a different person. Those first 5 years of my life in Philadelphia as a free child untethered me from the history of being black in the South. My mother gave me a freedom.
Those were chains.
They really were. But I came to understand through this book, I remembered sitting on the front porch and having my mother talk to me about loving a place that doesn't love you, that she loves the South.
This cover, how did you come about this cover?
Again, my husband. This is my debutante cotillion. I was 17 years old. 2 weeks later, my mother died.
Wow.
And I don't have many possessions from the past, but I had this picture. And when my husband saw this picture, he said, I love that picture. So I've always had it in a prominent place in our home. And when I wrote Primary Lessons, the publisher designed another whole kind of cover. He said, no, that debutante cotillion picture has to go on the cover. Now, mind you, I'm a nobody negotiating with a publisher
Yeah.
what I want on the cover. So I pushed for it, and later they said to me that was the best choice for the book. That
Yeah.
cover
Now,
sells
why
the book.
why the dress?
A debutante cotillion is a young woman's presentation to the public. There is a formal party with a preview training where you're taught how to drink tea and how to walk and how to cross your legs and how to talk in public, how to stand up straight. And you get a beautiful, you wear a white dress, white heels. I have on a tiara. I wore long white gloves,
Wow.
fancy pearl earrings,
You
and you are
became
presented.
a woman.
And in it, I talk about the sense of the night that I stood on that stage as they read my bio to the crowd. My mother was in the audience. I felt that they had a spotlight on me. I felt that I could be anything. I wasn't just a poor little color girl living in the South. I was a young woman on the cusp of possibility. So that's what the debutante cotillion for me was. It's really up north an introduction to society to find you a husband. That wasn't what it was for
Yeah.
me. It was this sense of my value.
Coming of age.
Yes.
Coming of age. Wow. Wow. And to put it in writing, to share this with so many black, African American, colored, they've gone through so many different
And
titles.
I go through those namings in the book.
Yeah, and to find identity in this, and to go through all of that and say, but who is Sarah Bracey White?
Well, people see me, and I'm, quote, Director of Arts and Culture for the town of Greenburgh. I'm in an interracial marriage. I live in a community where I'm able to do pretty much. People have no idea of where I've come from. And when they read the book, they're often surprised. But they will always say to me, "You're still that rebellious little girl, aren't you?"
Yeah. And your mother gave you a gift.
Yes.
She did.
Yes.
And she gave you the freedom that you needed to be who you needed to be. How she saw it, I have no idea. But somehow she knew she had to set you free.
Well, the thing that's really interesting for me is I thought my mother tried to contain me. I have a master's degree only to calm my dead mother. She told me I was a jack of all trades and master of none. So I got a master's degree and said, okay,
Now I am a master.
now I can go do whatever I want. But my mother was very tough on me, and I didn't understand why. She was very protective.
Sometimes you have to.
And my husband likes to say, oh, she could see the fire in you, and she knew you were going someplace, but had I gotten caught in a lot of the traps that young girls get caught in high school, I would never have gone off and become all I could be.
Yep.
I'm the best I can.
Yep.
That's my goal.
It's funny because I think I mentioned to you that I'll be speaking to about 100 Girl Scouts soon, and one of the last things I said is you need to be all you can be. You need to look, see, understand the world around you, because this is the world that you live in. You don't have to be tied to what was. You have to be tied to what could be. And that's who you are. You are such a delight to spend time with.
Well, thank you. You've asked me things nobody's asked me before.
Well, you told me things I've never quite heard this way. And the one bad thing about this, we've got about a minute and a half, Sarah. What do we tell these people? Tell the young girls out there what they need to know.
It's possible to be what you think you want to be. You don't have to have anybody's permission. That you simply have to decide how to play the cards that life has given you. They're in your hands. It's what you do that makes the difference.
Oh, Sarah, you're so right. What a treat to know you. I'm going to have to read this book cover to cover.
And if you want to hear more about me, visit my website, onmymind.org, where I do essays about my life.
Did you just hear that? Go to her website, find out more about her, read this book, Primary Lessons by Sarah Bracey White. Sarah, what a treat.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure to have you here. And guess what? When you go to another show now, I'm going back. I want to hear more about this. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of One-on-One with Sarah Bracey